Doug Showalter, CEO of AE, heard a faint zing heralding the receipt of a message from the team. "Your 10 o'clock is here." At one time, this message would have been relayed over the intercom. After the pandemic, times changed. Now it was all about Teams, email, or Slack. Employees, starting with the CEO, were not to use any other form of 1:1 communication so that all communications could be controlled by the court. No texting and certainly no Snapchat. Not for the first time, Doug silently cursed the name of his predecessor and his legacy of sexual harassment, which was part of the same Me Too movement that sent Harvey Weinstein to prison. The courts made sure that Ascendant was a safe work environment for women. Safe and profitable at the same time. Two goals that were often at odds with each other. Fortunately for Doug, he succeeded at both, and sexual harassment, while not completely eradicated, became less and less of an issue, thanks in no small part to creatives like his next visitor. "Send them in, Jocelyn." Doug stood up and walked around his desk. His visitor had become too important to the success of AEE not to be met at the door. Jocelyn led the two men through the door into Doug's spacious, modern, brightly lit office overlooking the hills surrounding Los Angeles. "Tyler. Good to see you, brother." "Good morning, Andy," he addressed the men. Tyler was Tyler Sherman, creator and host of the most successful scripted series currently on television. He was accompanied by Andy Daniels, Senior Vice President of Streaming at Ascendant. Doug led them over to a white leather conversation chair in the corner. "What can I get you guys? Coffee? Coke?" Both men declined a drink and Jocelyn smiled at them all, telling them to let her know if they needed anything. Despite her beauty, Jocelyn had a very professional and businesslike approach to her work. But it was impossible to hide the fact that she had an amazing body. Doug noticed that neither Tyler nor Andy turned around to look at her as she left. Times were definitely changing, he thought, not without some sense of satisfaction. "So, Tyler, how's it going at the ranch?" The ranch in question was the Straight Flush Ranch in Central Texas, where Tyler's most popular TV show, The Captain, was filmed. It was a heavily fictionalized version of the life of Scottish Sea Captain Angus McQueen, who left the sea life to establish a Texas ranch. At over 800,000 acres, the McQueen Ranch was the largest ranch in the United States and one of the largest in the world, although there are ranches in Argentina and Australia that surpass McQueen as he was popularly known. Although some exterior scenes were filmed on the McQueen Ranch, the bulk of the filming took place on the Straight Flush Ranch, which was owned by Tyler Sherman. Fictionalized stories about the McQueen Ranch had been filmed before, but in the case of The Captain, the series was filmed with the full cooperation of the McQueen family. MCQ-branded merchandise was flying off store shelves, and as part of the contract with Ascendant, the McQueen family retained all merchandising rights. They were very happy with their deal, and Ascendant got the most popular show on television. Tyler created a spin-off of The Captain, which was a huge success on Ascendant's streaming service. These gave a boost to AEE's streaming plans and gave them a significant advantage over their competitors in the streaming war. "Well, we just finished," Tyler grumbled. Although Tyler had been in Hollywood for 20 years, he retained the speech and mannerisms of a ranch kid. Tall and agile, square-jawed, he had tried his hand at acting, but despite small parts in movies and cameo roles in a few TV series, his acting career never took off. It was when he tried his hand as a screenwriter that good fortune fell upon him. Of his first 3 screenplays, 2 of them were nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. The screenplay that was not nominated was a movie that Tyler also directed. It performed modestly at the box office, but gained hot popularity on streaming services. That led to a deal with AEE. "All that's left is to finish cutting the last 3 episodes," he says, referring to the editing process. "So we're in time for the premiere of the first episode?" asked Andy. Was there any doubt? Tyler was running the ship, and everyone knew it. "I can't wait for it to start," Doug says. "I'm as big a fan as anyone." He leaned back in his chair and looked at Tyler, who seemed to have a slight smirk on his face. "What's really on your mind, Tyler?" he asked. Tyler smirked. "I need $200 million from you boys. Give or take." Andy's mouth dropped open in shock. $200 million, he squeaked. "Dollars?" Give or take, Tyler confirmed. That's a big number, even for you, Doug said. Tyler was good, but expensive. Most of his shows were filmed on his Texas ranch, for which he charged a daily rate. Every cow and horse used in filming was also paid a daily rate. All the wranglers, veterinarians and extra cowboys worked on Tyler's ranch and their wages were also included in the production cost. Even the guy who shoed the horses, a blacksmith, as AE's accountants found out, was paid at cost of production. Tyler was making money hard at work, but with the results he was giving AE, no one was complaining. So he wasn't as shocked as his vice president of streaming. What's on your mind? Tyler reached for the leather satchel he'd placed on the floor as soon as he took his seat. He pulled out 2 paperback books and held one out to Doug and Andy each. Lawyers? Doug read the title of the book aloud. $200 million for a TV show about lawyers? Andy groaned in frustration. He was a firm believer in licking the ass of his biggest talents, but fucking lawyers? Not just lawyers, but a specific group of lawyers. Have you guys ever heard of Bonham McLeod Garcia? No, Andy said. Yeah, Doug said. Andy looked at him in surprise. Doug only smiled. BMacG. We used them in Texas when we needed local representation. They're big and good. And expensive. God, they're expensive. Doug shook his head, remembering his dealings with BMCG. First, they had refused to represent AE in a wrongful death case filed by the family of an extra who died on the set of a movie that was being filmed in Dallas. Only when AE managed to convince the partners of their innocence by proving that the death was caused by the statistician being intoxicated on set did they agree to take the case. It is the oldest law firm in Texas and one of the oldest in the United States. Congressmen, senators, Supreme Court justices and one vice president have come out of BMCG. Not to mention a whole host of district and appellate court judges. They have a reputation for honesty and integrity unmatched by any other law firm, Tyler explained. Doug nodded his head in agreement. Okay, but how is that going to make for interesting television? Why are people going to watch a show about a bunch of Texas lawyers every week? Tyler pointed to the books he handed them. This is my source material. And it's good. Doug flipped through the thick novel. Tell me how it's done. 2 brothers came to Texas from South Carolina in 1834. Their names were James and Robert Bonham. They opened their law office in what is now Austin, Texas. They quickly became attached to a group that favored Texas independence. Eventually they split up and continued the fight. Robert joined General Sam Houston and was promoted to lieutenant. James joined their cousin Colonel William Travis, where he was promoted to major. Doug raised the index finger of his right hand, stopping Tyler. Travis was the commander at the Alamo along with Bowie and Crockett, right? Tyler nodded his head. Actually, Bonham left the Alamo on a mission for Travis. He sneaked through the Mexican army and delivered a message to Sam Houston. He then rode back to the Alamo through the Mexican army to fight and die with his comrades. After the war in Texas independence, Robert returned to practicing law. He married and had children. His oldest daughter married a Scottish immigrant named Alexander MacLeod. He studied law and eventually became a partner. And the G? It was Garcia, Gary asked. Tomas Antonio Garcia. His father saved Robert's life at the Battle of San Jacinto, where the Texans defeated Mexican General Santa Anna. Thomas's father was killed in that battle. Robert took it upon himself to pay for the schooling of Thomas and his sister Angelica, who were teenagers at the time of their father's death. Thomas was trained as a lawyer and entered the service of Bonham McLeod, who eventually became BMacG. Robert was only 10 years older than Angelica. When his first wife died in childbirth, he married Angelica. Pretty incestuous law firm, isn't it? Andy snorted. Tyler squinted his eyebrow, and Doug looked at Andy with mild irritation. Andy held up his hands. He realized that this was a passion project for Tyler, and he'd better contain his usual Hollywood sarcasm. The book traces the firm's journey through the formation of Texas as a republic and then as a state. Then it talks about slavery, the Civil War, Reconstruction, the rise of cattle empires, the development of the oil and gas industry, the space race, and the 1960s. They are just as powerful, if not more so, than they were 50 years ago. Their history is the most Texan of all. Can you think of another law firm where the attorneys were involved in shootouts with bandits, rednecks, and Comanches? Wow, Andy said. That sounded a lot more interesting than watching some Wall Street lawyer talk about arbitration. Any unexpected casting choices? Asked Doug. Tyler shocked Hollywood with his casting choices for one of the Captain spin-offs. He chose retired two-time Super Bowl champion quarterback Kyle Kinsler and his wife Megan Bond Kinsler, a beauty who is also a former captain of the U.S. women's national soccer team. These two starred in commercials and guest stars in TV sitcoms, usually playing some version of themselves, and thus received their SAG cards. However, they weren't actors and didn't claim to be. They accepted the roles thinking it would be an adventure. Even more, they were duped. Tyler took them through a 6-month acting class and a month-long cowboy college to prepare them for a role in a 19th-century saga. Critics agreed that they both acted more than adequately. Kyle is more believable than Megan, but their on-screen chemistry was electric and jumped off the screen. Tyler shrugged slightly. Mark Tibbs has signed on to play James Bonham. He'll appear in the first 2 episodes. Tibbs? You have Mark Tibbs? Excitedly asked Andy. Mark Tibbs had recently won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. Can you extend his role for a few episodes? Not since he died at the Alamo, no. Once he's dead, he's dead. No zombies are planned for the Alamo, Tyler said in an indifferent tone. Who do you have on Robert? Asked Doug. I have a few ideas of who I want to take on the role of young Robert. That decision will depend on who will play the role of the older Robert. I have an idea that I'm running through my head of who I want. If things work out the way I hope they will, then I will make a decision on who will play the role of young Robert. Tyler leaned back in his chair and began to carelessly examine his fingernails before giving out his scoop. Maria Elena Montoya has signed on to play Robert's wife, Angelica. Both Doug and Andy looked at Tyler in amazement. How? They asked in one voice. She supposedly retired from the acting profession when her husband died. Didn't she go into seclusion with her family? Asked Doug. Maria Elena Montoya was the eldest daughter of the younger sister of the King of Spain, one Tomás Vega Montoya. After college, she modeled in Paris and London before being offered a role as an actress. She discovered that she loved acting more than modeling. She got serious about her new craft, taking theater classes and gaining experience by going to auditions for Broadway plays. It paid off. She was nominated twice for an Academy Award, but she still hadn't won, even though everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Until an accident happened. Maria was pregnant with her husband, Formula One driver Jean-Pierre Degas' first child, when he lost control of his car at the Bahrain Grand Prix and crashed into a wall. He died from the impact. Maria was present at the race, watching from her hotel room, and saw the impact and the fireball that formed. She immediately realized that her husband was dead. That same night she suffered a miscarriage. She was flown to Spain on a chartered plane and heavily sedated. She spent 3 years in seclusion and did not appear in public until recently. Her agent and manager turned down anyone who approached her. On Christmas Day, she was photographed at Mass with the Spanish royal family. It was her first public appearance since her husband's memorial service. The fact that Tyler had mentioned in passing that she was returning to acting thanks to his TV series stunned Doug and Andy. Wow. Okay. I think we're okay with the sequel. And your source material, is it reliable? Asked Doug. He picked up the book and looked at the cover. Who's the author? Jack McLeod. I take it he's related to McLeod from BMG? Tyler nodded his head. He's a relative. Everyone in the family either becomes a lawyer or goes into the military. Doug read the brief biography of the author on the back cover. After retiring from the Army, General Jack McLeod began teaching history at Central Texas State University. This is his first novel. Not much of a bio, is there? Asked Doug. He has a Wikipedia entry. You should read it, said Tyler. Doug reached into the breast pocket of his suit, pulled out his iPhone, and began pressing a button. He read for a few seconds, and his eyebrows rose upward. Doug grinned. This guy's the real deal, isn't he? Tyler only nodded his head. Jack and Katie McLeod's house. Round Rock, Texas. Jack McLeod, Brigadier General, USA, retired, was excited and couldn't wait to break the news to his wife. If you didn't know him well, you might not have been able to pick up on his excitement. If you knew him well, however, you guessed by the half-smile that turned into a half-smile for a split second. Throughout his military career, McLeod had always been able to keep his emotions in check, and to him that brief smirk was the equivalent of unbridled glee. A television series, he thought to himself. They really want to turn my book into a television series. And not just anyone, but Tyler Sherman. You couldn't pick up a newspaper or magazine, print or online, and not read about Sherman's mega success as a prolific television producer. Jack didn't watch a lot of TV, but he did watch The Captain. Sure, it was a bit of a soap opera, but it was gripping nonetheless. And that's who was going to turn his book into a TV show. Because of a call from Alex Cordell, his agent and attorney, McLeod canceled classes for the day, an unheard-of event that caused faculty members in the history department at Central Texas State University, another Austin university, to speculate about what might have happened. Was it military-related? Was it personal? Why did the general cancel his morning classes? The professors were curious, and the students were just glad for the suddenly free hour. Meanwhile, Jack rushed home to share the happy news with his wife. The red Corvette in the driveway made Jack's stomach knot. The individual license plate that read De Bull was causing him more anxiety than he'd felt since the last time he'd been in combat. Having to park on the street in front of his own house added irritation and forced Jack to do what he did best, confront the situation. He opened the front door and entered the house. Seeing no one in the living room, he paused and turned, listening to the sounds that soon came from the bedroom. Jack heard wet slaps as he approached the bedroom, and when he was at the door, he had no doubt he would find it. Katie was on all fours at the foot of the bed and the strange man was thrusting into her. With one hand he was holding her brunette hair like a mare and with the other he was spanking her ass as she screamed. The bedroom smelled like a brothel. His wife stared at him shocked when she finally noticed Jack standing in the doorway with a furious expression on his face. The piece of shit didn't even pause. He continued to walk into Katie, smirking at Jack. Katie jumped up on her knees and screamed, "Danny, stop it." She had the sense to at least look a little embarrassed. She got off the bed and started to put on her robe. Jack had seen her naked 1,000 times, and yet she was hiding her nakedness from her husband and not her lover? Jack, I'm sorry you had to see that. I was hoping I could tell you about it better than I can now. Jack felt the anger building up in him and began to contain his emotions, otherwise he would have been tempted to kill the smirking jerk who was slowly dressing next to his wife. He had the large build of a soccer lineman who hadn't been to the weight room in years. Fat on top of layers of muscle. And body hair. Lots of body hair. Danny, wait for me in the car. I'll be there in a minute. Are you sure, baby? I can wait for you right here. He continued to smirk cheekily at Jack. Katie smiled at him, I'll be fine. Jack won't cause any problems. How about you? Katie looked at Jack. Jack looked at his wife in disgust. Yeah, don't bother. I wouldn't touch her. As far as I'm concerned, you can take her with you. I never want to see you two again. A hint of anger flashed across Katie's face. Really, Jack? After 20 years of marriage, you show me such respect? Jack looked at Katie with a neutral expression and ignored her idiotic question. I'm not even going to ask why or for how long. I just want you out of this house. Pack your things and leave. Katie nodded. That's our plan. I was hoping to let you know more gently. I'm leaving you for Danny. He's going to give me a much better life than the one I could have with you. Katie pulled a couple of suitcases out of her closet and began filling them with clothes. I thought you had so much potential. I thought you'd be at the top of your game. I thought you'd get a third or fourth star. Then to Congress or the Senate. I was going to be somebody in Washington. And then you worked your way up to foreman, resigned, and got a job teaching school." Kathy shook her head in bewilderment. "How could you expect me to settle for something like that? I put up with the role of army wife for 20 years and this is my payment?" She waved her hand, pointing to the modest cabin that had been their home until 5 minutes ago. "I need something better than this. I need better than you." Katie continued stuffing clothes into her suitcase. "I'm not going to have this conversation with you. Just walk away. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce." Katie sighed. "Fine. You'll probably try to embarrass me or shame me. I understand that. But I'm leaving you for a much bigger and better opportunity. His name is Danny DeBull Bullard. He played in the NFL. He owns the biggest Chevy dealership in Texas. He's going to give me the kind of life you could never give me. It may not be as glamorous as being a senator's wife in Washington, but I can handle it. I don't expect you to be happy for me, but don't be such an angry little boy. It doesn't suit you." Jack looked at her with the kind of indifference with which he would look at prisoners of war in a theater of war. She was the enemy now. Turning his back on his ex-wife, he left the bedroom and headed for the bar. He poured himself a coup. Lift fingers of bourbon and exhaled slowly. Turning around, he noticed his wife's boyfriend sitting in Jack's chair. In his fucking chair. "Get out of my house, you miserable piece of shit." Danny stood up and laughed without any sign of mirth. "Hey, I get it. You're going to find out that you're a cuckold and have been eating my cum out of your wife's pussy for months. That should be a shock to the system." He chuckled again. "I'll leave when I'm ready, damn it, and not a minute sooner." Jack took 3 quick steps, ending up in front of Danny. Danny's eyes went wide with fear. What he saw in Jack McLeod's face was a glimpse of his own mortality. He raised his hands and stepped back quickly. Katie ran into the living room. Jack was calmly drinking bourbon, and Danny stood with his back against the wall, his face pale and his heart racing. "Damn it, Jack. Act like an adult, not a kid who's had his toy taken away. I told him to get out, and now I'm telling you the same thing. Get out. Now. We're leaving. Danny, get my stuff." "Jack, this could have gone easily. But you want to do it the hard way. Okay. We'll do it the hard way." Danny walked out of the bedroom, carrying Kathy's suitcases and smirking at Jack, whose courage had returned to him when Kathy interfered in his affairs. "Don't feel bad, the better man won." Jack looked at him. "Congratulations. You've won a prize. And what a prize she is. A cheating wife." He shook his head in disgust. Danny looked first at Jack, then at Kathy, and his swagger became less noticeable than before. He walked out without another word. Katie looked at Jack, anger written all over her face. "You're going to pay for this, asshole. I'll pick up the rest of your stuff later." She slammed the front door behind her. Jack took a sip of bourbon and wondered how a day that had started on such a high note could have gone so horribly wrong. He sighed and reached for his cell phone. Time to call his daughter Kelsey and let her know that her parents were getting a divorce. Jonathan, Jack, McLeod was never a typical army officer. Both of Jack's parents died when he was in high school, and the last 2 years of his high school career were raised by his maternal grandfather, Lonnie Boudreau, a Cajun refinery worker who never met a law he didn't want to break. Lonnie was usually a good guy, but with one extra drink he could go from zero to a son of a bitch. The problem was that you never knew exactly when he was going to have a drink. After graduating from high school and knowing he wasn't ready for college, Jack enlisted in the Army the day he turned 18. Jack enlisted as an E1 private with MOS, Military Occupational Specialty, 11B, infantry rifleman, also known in military parlance as target, pop-up, non-electric. Based on his test scores and success in basic training, he was approved for jump school and then ranger school. By the time he received his orders to deploy permanently to Fort Bragg, he had been promoted to the rank of Private First Class, E3, and his uniform featured jump wings and the Ranger emblem. Shortly after arriving at Fort Bragg, he enrolled as a part-time student at Fayetteville State University. Among the students in both the undergraduate and graduate programs at FSU were many enlisted officers and enlisted men. The university was equipped for both full-time and part-time study, so Jack was able to attend classes while on base or by correspondence when he was temporarily separated to another duty station or changed duty stations. By the end of July 1990, Jack was getting into a familiar rut of training and studying. And on August 2, 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. During Operation Desert Storm, Jack had been sent to Kuwait and then Iraq, where that brief skirmish had occurred. He shook his head at some of the decisions made by his superiors. It was there that he received his first Bronze Star and his first Purple Heart. He received the Bronze Star for being in the wrong place at the wrong time and was awarded the Purple Heart. The incident was so minor that Jack never talked about it and was almost embarrassed to wear the award. Getting shot in the ass by a scared 12-year-old was no reason to brag. A week after receiving his awards, he was sent back to Fort Benning. Standing on the tarmac waiting to board the C-130 airplane that was taking him back to Benning, he looked around the airport and figured this wouldn't be the last time he played in this sandbox. Through classes, correspondence courses, and CLEP tests, Jack was able to earn a bachelor's degree in history in 6 years, 2 years longer than normal. By this time Jack was a sergeant, E5, and decided that although he liked the Army, he would enjoy being an officer more. Jack applied to officer candidate school and, after passing a panel of 3, was accepted into OCS. For Jack, OCS was a simple step. As a junior non-commissioned officer, he was well versed in military protocol and procedures. The senior NCOs in his unit noted his calm, collected demeanor and natural leadership skills. They all felt that when the going got tough or the situation reached a stalemate, Jack McLeod was exactly the kind of soldier you wanted by your side. After completing a 12-week course at Fort Benning, Jack was promoted to second lieutenant and had his gold bars pinned on him by his instructor since he had no wife or family. After receiving his rank, Jack was ordered to Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, for his first assignment as a platoon leader with the 82nd Airborne Regiment. Jack had already been in the Army for 8 years and had attained the rank of first lieutenant when he met Kathy Bascom. Kathy was working as a bartender at an Irish-style pub in Fayetteville when Jack walked in there with several platoon leaders assigned to the 82nd Brigade. The Lion's Den pub wasn't particularly popular with Fort Bragg soldiers, but that's what attracted Jack to it. With its Celtic music and food selection, Jack and his friends knew they could have a relaxing evening. All 3 were immediately captivated by the brunette beauty who was their waitstaff. The owner of the classic beauty often seen on the covers of fashion magazines was 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed 130 pounds. Her brunette hair was gathered into a ponytail. The 3 junior officers' tongues were untied in amazement. Katie, for her part, was ready to dismiss the trio until she looked into the gray eyes of the tallest of them. Slim, with a crew-cut bob haircut and eyes that seemed to stare into the depths of her soul. Katie's tongue lolled for the first time in all her time with another man. And this one was a lieutenant, for heaven's sake. She'd dated majors, colonels, and even a general. But this lieutenant had left her completely confused. They made a date for the next night and were soon together when they weren't working. Jack continued to serve successfully in the military. He earned a master's degree in American history and began work on his doctoral dissertation. He wasn't sure what he would do with his doctorate, but he enjoyed academia and thought he might go into teaching after retirement. On September 11, 2001, Jack was a Major, 04, and commanded a company in the 82nd Regiment. Within hours they learned they were being mobilized. A few weeks later, Jack's company was on patrol in the mountains of Afghanistan. It was a war unlike any warlords had ever faced. Everyone could be considered an enemy. Or friend. Or both. It was not for nothing that the decades-long rivalry between Britain and Russia in Afghanistan was called the Great Game. It was for his actions while patrolling Unai Pass in Maidan province that Wardak Jack was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. In fact, Jack's DSC was recommended for the Medal of Honor. Senior leadership did not want to hand out too many medals at the beginning of a conflict. One of the lessons learned during Desert Storm was that if too many people received medals of bravery, the medals would become useless. The few cases truly deserving of the Medal of Honor were downgraded to the DSC or Silver Star in the early days of the Afghan conflict. Bravery is often about looking at a situation calmly and thinking, "Today is a good day to die." His platoon was pinned down by the enfilade, that is, the line of fire along the entire length of the platoon column. Since Jack was at the head of the column and the fire from the enfilade was coming from away from the head, he did the only thing he could think of: he attacked the enfilade. Running the entire length of the attacking group, Jack was able to kill 6 Afghan fighters and severely wound 4 others. This broke the will of the remaining Afghans and they scattered. An embedded journalist from the New York Times watched the whole thing, and for a short time Jack became famous. A situation he despised and Kathy loved. In her weekly letters, she attached links to news stories about him. Links he didn't read or acknowledge in any way. Soon Jack's time in the sun was over. Back in the States, the first thing Jack did was ask Kathy to marry him. She agreed, and they were quietly married in a post chapel led by the battalion chaplain. Jack served 2 tours of duty in Iraq. During his first tour of duty, he was awarded a Silver Star for bravery. During his second tour, he was awarded a second Bronze Star. He also received his second Purple Heart for wounds sustained in a firefight with the Republican Guard. After returning to the world, or the land of the Big PX, as the old-timers called it, Jack's life went on as usual. He continued working on his doctoral dissertation, and he and Katie got busy with their family. Their daughter Kelsey was born 9 months later, almost the day after Jack returned from his first Iraq tour. Katie loved her daughter, but wished she had more of her features. She had her father's blonde hair and gray eyes. People said she had her mother's nose, but what did that even mean? Everyone has a nose. By the time Jack was 43 years old, he had served 25 years and was a lieutenant colonel in command of a battalion. He had completed his doctoral dissertation entitled Texas Statehood as a reflection of the success of the Bonham-McLeod Garcia law firm. His dissertation was a study of how a particular law firm influenced the fortunes of Texas and vice versa. Jack was distantly related to the law firm's founders and during his 3-year tenure at Fort Hood, Texas, was given unlimited access to the vast trove of historical documents the law firm kept. Jack was already thinking of retiring when he was informed that he was on the list for promotion to colonel. Being on the list was not unusual in itself, but Jack was informed that his name was at the top of the list. That was unexpected. A back-channel source had told him that his name on the promotion list was a tacit admission that his DSC should have been awarded the Medal of Honor. Jack decided not to resign, and after the promotion, he was offered a teaching position at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. His time at West Point proved to Jack that he loved teaching. He thrived in an academic environment and loved interacting with students. Katie enjoyed her time at West Point because she interacted with many prominent politicians and members of the media there. Although West Point is primarily a college, by its very nature, many high-profile and famous people pass through its halls. Katie has met politicians, foreign dignitaries, and the President of the United States. She has eaten it all with a spoon. After 3 years at West Point, Jack's name was placed on the list for the rank of Brigadier General. He was promoted and ordered to lead a brigade at Fort Benning. Jack was well aware that the U.S. Army was the most politicized organization in the United States, if not the world. The reciprocity, backstabbing, and general trickery at the general officer level was embarrassing, and Jack quickly grew tired of it. He decided to retire and do something else with his life. After completing his dissertation, he had the germ of an idea of how to turn his dissertation into a novel. His service at West Point gave him time to do so, and so his first novel came into being. At this time, the novel The Lawyers was completed. It was accepted by a small publishing house in Austin. The novel would never become a bestseller, but it became a calling card that every university wanted to have, a published author in the state. The University of Central Texas gladly hired a retired U.S. Army general with a PhD and a published novel. Kathy was beyond furious. Moving to Texas. Loss of prestige. Loss of the future she envisioned for herself in Washington. And so the seeds were sown. "You've got to be kidding me," exclaimed Kelsey. "Your mom cheated on you? In your own bed?" Jack heard the heartache in his daughter's voice. "Are you going to get a divorce? Will you be able to forgive her?" Jack sighed. "She wants a divorce as badly as I do. She's moving to Dallas and settling in with her boyfriend. I'll serve her with the papers in the next few days. I know Mom can be a real bitch sometimes, but I never expected her to be this mean. You know I'm here for you, Dad? I'm on Team McLeod. She could be Team Bascom or Team Bullard or whatever, but I'm on your side. Always and forever. I know, baby, and I'm so happy and proud to have you as my daughter. I don't expect you to cut your mother out of your life. After all, she is your mother. I'm not going to try to alienate the two of you. She was a good mom, but she was never a great mom. She was always selfish and self-centered. I can't believe she's with that used car salesman. I've seen his commercials. He's disgusting. He's a fat slob who used to play soccer and now he sells cars. What the fuck is she thinking, Dad? I don't know, Kels. But she's his problem now." Jack talked to his daughter for a few more minutes, mostly about how school was going. Kelsey was a freshman at West Point. She had decided to follow in her father's footsteps and become an army officer. This decision made Katie even more angry. Now not only will she be living in Texas, but her daughter is moving to college on the other side of the country. Jack's life went on as most people's lives do if they are lucky. Jack filed for divorce on the grounds of adultery, and Kathy countersued on the grounds of mental cruelty and abuse. Kathy was forced to admit that there was no evidence of mental cruelty and abuse. She argued that Jack had no evidence of adultery. Jack produced a sealed plastic package of bedding from the day he caught her with a used car salesman. Although there was no fault in the state, proof of adultery affected alimony. She was not subject to alimony. Kathy asked for half of Jack's army pension. Although Jack served 30 years in the army, he was married to Kathy for only 20 of those years. This tended to entitle Kathy to 1/3 of his pension at the discretion of the judge. Because of the evidence of adultery, that share was reduced to 10%. This infuriated Kathy even more. Soon the divorce was finalized, and Kathy completely disappeared from Jack's life. Kelsey refused any contact with her mother. She blocked her mother on all social media, email, and phone. She didn't bother to respond to her mother's invitation to the wedding. This further enraged Katie against Jack. But the thing that will upset Katie the most is the fact that she nearly goes mad with anger and jealousy, a train that hasn't even pulled away from the station yet. Straight Flush Ranch, 125 miles west of Austin, Texas. It is an honor to meet you, General McLeod. Tyler Sherman extended his hand in greeting to his guests. General McLeod was accompanied by his attorney/agent Alex Cordell. Alex headed the entertainment law department of Bonham, McLeod, Garcia, LLP, better known as BMCG. Please, call me Jack. I was looking forward to meeting you too. Jack shook Tyler's hand, and they quickly sized each other up. They were both tall and slender, with a rough-hewn appearance that, while not conventionally beautiful, still made women turn their heads and stare. Both Texans, but both had experience living in other parts of the country. Tyler had dark hair with flecks of gray and wore designer stubble. After his divorce, Jack McLeod changed. Gone were the haircut and clean shave he had worn for nearly 40 years. Instead, he had let his blonde hair grow back so that it now reached his collar. He had once read that an author had described them as long like a country music singer's, and that was the most accurate description he could come up with. There was a little gray mixed in with the blonde hair, but it was something to look for. He had also grown a mustache, which had turned dark blonde without the slightest sign of gray. He looked at least 10 years younger than his real age of 52. In his army career, he had seen so many soldiers who looked older than their years that he was genuinely shocked that by growing hair and a mustache, he had lost years. Can I get you guys something to drink? Tyler waved his hand toward a bar cart that stood in the corner of his office. After the guests declined, he invited them to sit in the chairs in his office. The office was actually a ranch barn. It was 50 yards from the main ranch house and had been custom built so that Thayer could use it as an office while working on his Texas ranch. It was luxuriously furnished and could have been designed by Ralph Lauren. A Neiman Marcus-style ranch house, that was the motive, and it worked perfectly. All three of them sat down and Tyler began the discussion. "You've had suggestions for a week now. What are your thoughts?" Alex answered for Jack. "Let's discuss the matter with Bonham, McLeod, and Garcia. We agree with the proposal in principle, but with one change." "I'm sure I can guess," Tyler said dryly, "but why don't you tell me anyway?" "We retain the rights to the goods," Alex said. "I told the costumers at Ascendant that the dog wouldn't hunt when they added that to the contract. I'm sure that BMCG retaining the merch rights is not a deal breaker. Other than that, are we good?" "Absolutely. Now let's talk about Jack. $250,000 for TV rights is too little. Even with the EP credit. How many seasons do you plan to show and why aren't you planning on using Jack as a writer?" $250,000 for TV rights for an aspiring author with very little recognition is quite normal. An executive producer credit will pay big dividends in overseas syndication. Everything we put out is snapped up by overseas markets. Jack, your cut as executive producer will be over $1 million per season, and we think there's enough material in your book for 4 seasons. As for writing the scripts? Tyle shook his head. "I write all the scripts. I'll let you read them and listen to your suggestions, but I have the final say on every script. Period. End of story." Alex looked at Jack and shrugged. "It's up to you, but it's a good deal for you. I want to make a couple small changes, but overall, I think you should take it." Tyler said, "There's one little detail I'd like to touch on. Have you heard about the casting yet?" Alex had definitely heard about the casting. It was all over the news. The casting of Mark Tibbs would be a big enough event, but the casting of Maria Elena Montoya caused an earthquake like tremors in Hollywood. It was the biggest acquisition of the last decade. Jack nodded. Mark Tibbs for the role of James Bonham and Maria Elena Montoya for the role of Angelica Bonham, Robert's wife. Who do you choose for the role of Robert Bonham? Tyler turned his head to the right and then to the left, as if releasing internal tension. "I have a guy in mind for the part. He's not a professional actor. As a matter of fact, I don't know if he's had any acting experience. But he has the looks, charisma, and presence, and I think he'll be a natural." He paused and leaned back in his chair. "Okay," said Alex. "Now that you have our best interests at heart, who is it?" In response, Tyler held out a piece of paper to Alex and Jack. Alex lowered his gaze, and his eyes widened as he realized at once what Tyler was getting at. Jack, on the other hand, just looked puzzled. "It's my Wikipedia entry." It took a second, but then it finally got to Jack. "No. Not just no, but hell no. Jack, you're perfect for this role. You have the looks and the charisma. I know you're not an actor, but if I could turn a soccer player into a respectable actor, I know we can do it with you. Well, for one thing, I'm too old to start playing. I'll look ridiculous." "Let me object," Tyler said. "Have you ever seen the John Wayne movie True Grit?" Seeing that Jack nodded, Tyler continued. "When John Wayne was in that movie, he was the same age as Tom Cruise was when he finished filming the last Mission Impossible movie. And you're almost a decade younger than Tom Cruise. I'll give you another name, O.D. Murphy. The most decorated soldier of World War II. He was awarded every medal for bravery from every Allied country in the war. He became an actor. Wrote an autobiography and made a movie playing himself. It's gonna be okay, Jack. If a Texas boy like O.D. Murphy can act, I know you can too. But I mean..." Jack looked around, trying to parry Tyler's argument. He was stuck for an answer. Finally he looked at Alex, who was trying to hold back a laugh. "The Gables on the Creek. Turtle Creek. Dallas, Texas. Mrs. Bullard, I'm so glad you could join me. Kathy couldn't believe her luck. She had only been married to Jack for 3 months and it had already happened. When Carolyn Collier called her and asked her to meet for lunch, she thought there had been some kind of mistake. Carolyn Collier was a Dallas society woman and married to the owner of Collier Petroleum. Carolyn told Kathy that the meeting would be about the annual Beef and Butter Gala. Kathy knew that the BOG was the most exclusive annual event held in Dallas. It was the Texas version of the New York Met Gala. All the famous people, politicians and celebrities with Texas roots gathered there. "Please call me Kathy," she said, exchanging an air kiss with Carolyn. "And I'm Carolyn," she smiled. It was only partially true. Her closest friends called her Carrie. She had a feeling Kathy Bullard would never be so honored, but who knew? The ladies sat down at the table and were soon approached by a server who took their drink orders. Taking a cue from Carolyn, Kathy ordered a Chardonnay as well. "We were surprised when we found out that Danny Bullard had gotten married. Everyone thought he was a hardened bachelor. No one even knew he was seeing anyone. We dated for a few months. We chose to keep our relationship private. I'm a pretty private person and I don't like to spread about my personal affairs." Carolyn gave Kathy an appraising look. She only partially believed her story. She was reminded of the phrase in Julius Caesar about Cassius having lean and hungry eyes. Carolyn was sure there was more to the story, but chose not to continue. A wife's background wasn't always the deciding factor. She knew an African American Supreme Court justice who had met his Caucasian wife on a racial gambling prostitution site. As long as the wife was able to hide her past, who cared? "That's amazing," Carolyn said. To change the subject, "I wanted to meet you. Are you familiar with the Beef and Butter Gala?" "Bog?" "Yes, of course it is. It's famous. Everyone who's anyone goes to the Beef and Butter Gala." "Well, that's true. But it's actually a charity fundraiser. Every year we raise about $10 million for charity through the BOG. I've been the chair for the last 10 years, and my co-chair for the last 5 years has been Lorena Garcia Marquez. This year, Lorena wants to take a step back to spend time with her husband and their new baby." "You had a Mexican girl as co-chair?" asked Kathy, surprised. Maybe the BOG isn't as big a deal as she thought. Carolyn looked at Katie with narrowed eyes. "Lorena Garcia Marquez is Texas royalty. Her great-great-great-grandfather died at the Battle of San Jacinto fighting for Texas independence against Mexico. Her great-great-grandfather was one of the founders of the oldest and most respected law firm in Texas, if not the United States. She is a partner in that very same Bonham, McLeod, Garcia law firm, as is her husband. She is not some Mexican girl. Kathy turned pale when she heard this and realized she had done a rash thing. Did Carolyn know that she had once been married to McLeod and that he had written a book about the law firm? Rumors had reached her about a television series based on that book. Katie looked around the restaurant. Had she really been set up? "I apologize. It came out much worse than I meant it to. She sounds like an amazing person, and I'd like to meet her someday." Carolyn cast a leering glance at Kathy, but decided to give her credit. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she was a racist. Maybe she was a nervous racist. If so, that put her on par with half the wives in Dallas. Basically, we are looking for someone to bring new blood and sponsorship to the Beef and Butter Gala. This year's gala was held last month, but we are starting to work on the next gala right after that. Now we get down to business, Katie thought. What her ex-husband would call rat murder. She wasn't being set up, she was being ganged up on. Co-chair of the board of directors, if she could make a big enough donation. "How much are you counting on?" asked Katie. Carolyn was counting on a sponsorship of $250,000. After speaking with Kathy Bullard, Carolyn revised that figure upward. $300,000, she said. Kathy sighed when she heard that figure. It was a huge sum. There was no way she could agree to such a sum without discussing it with Danny first. "I'll have to discuss it with my husband," Kathy replied. "Of course, my dear. Think about it and let me know. But don't forget the doors it will open for you. You are new to Dallas society. It can be difficult to make acquaintances with the right people. This will prepare you well. Now let's enjoy some tuna niquas, shall we? Carolyn knew how to address people who were rising in society. Executive offices, Phoenix Financial, Austin, Texas. Office of Michael Sullivan, CEO. Hey, Danny. Good to see you again. Michael Sullivan led Danny Bullard into his office and headed for the chair in front of his desk. Some of the dealers he took to a seated group in the corner of the office, some he put in front of his desk as a power play. He didn't like Danny Bullard, and he wanted this meeting to end as soon as possible. The only reason he had agreed to meet with Danny at all was because he had traveled all the way from Dallas to Austin without an appointment. Michael felt that he could spare him a few minutes. After the pleasantries were exhausted, Michael asked Danny what he could do for him. Our dealership agreement is up for renewal in 6 months, Danny said. I'd like to talk to you about an early extension. As CEO of Phoenix Financial, Michael was not usually involved in dealer negotiations. He hired sales staff to do that. If a dealership was large enough to sell enough Phoenix Financial F&I products, they often requested that Michael be personally involved in the process. Other dealerships had such a long history with Phoenix that Michael wanted to be involved in the process to maintain the relationship with the dealership. Danny Bullard was neither. He was a former soccer player and was arrogant enough to think that warranted the CEO's involvement. We can talk about this, Michael began. He tapped a few keys on his computer. To date, sales of financial and insurance products are down 10%, but the loss ratio is up 20%. Tell me about it. Danny's face flushed for a moment when Sullivan asked a question about his operations. He'd always thought of Michael Sullivan as a pencil-thin bore. The kind of nerd who sits behind a desk and dotted and crossed eyes and crosses eyes all day long without having the slightest clue about the real world. He looked down on Sullivan and thought he was a big asshole. If Danny had ever deigned to look around Michael's office, he would have noticed the Golden Gloves trophies and pictures of Michael from the Army. He might even have noticed the Ranger emblems on Michael's uniform. But probably not. As far as the downturn in business, we are in a down cycle. Car sales in Dallas are either down or flat at most dealerships. It goes like this. Business goes up, business goes down. We'll pick up in a few months. As far as the loss ratio being up a lot. We lost our service manager a few months ago. I have to manage the service department and the dealership. It knocks me out, but I have several interviews scheduled for the service manager position and hope to fill it soon. It will help with the unprofitability. Danny knew this problem would arise. A dealer's loss ratio is the percentage of extended warranty sales to the amount of claims on those extended warranties. If it was a legitimate breakdown, a claim had to be made. The problem started when the service department started inflating those claims. The car needs 1 pull rod, but you tell the warranty company it needs 2. The gasket barely leaks a tiny amount of oil, but you claim it's a leak and the drips are visible. Suddenly a $200 claim swells to $1,200. That's good for the dealership, but not so good for the extended warranty company. Especially when you consider that the dealer has the right to reverse the decision. The cancellation. As an incentive to sell its F&I products, extended warranty, gap coverage, appearance protection plans, road hazard tire warranty, Phoenix Financial provided an interest-free loan to the director, owner, of the dealership. This loan was repaid through sales of F&I products. This is why the sales managers and F&I managers were so insistent on promoting these products. They had no idea what the owner's incentives were, but they knew they needed to sell F&I products to keep their jobs. Phoenix Financial provided Danny with a $5 million loan at the time he signed the dealership agreement. That agreement was expiring in 6 months, and Danny wanted another agreement with Phoenix. And a loan. Given the decline in sales and rising loss ratio, we may extend the dealer override to $2 million, but I'm not sure I'd be comfortable extending it by a larger amount. Danny didn't like that answer. Even though sales are down, we're still the largest GM dealer by sales volume in the entire Southwest. I was thinking of a $10 million markup. Michael shook his head. That's not going to happen. I might agree to 3, but we'll have to include certain safeguards and precautions in the contract. Danny wasn't happy, but he had no choice. He needed money right away, and Phoenix Financial was his best chance. He could have looked for a new finance company, but that process would have taken months, and he needed the money now. Damn Beef and Butter, Straight Flush Ranch, 125 miles west of Austin, Texas, the set of the TV show The Lawyers. "Are you settling in well, Jack?" asked Tyler Sherman. "Have you met any other talent yet?" Jack McLeod shook his head. "What the hell am I doing here, Tyler? 6 years ago I taught history at West Point. A year ago I taught history at KTSU. And now I have to convince people I'm an actor?" Jack shook his head. "You must be completely desperate if I'm the best you can do." Tyler laughed. "Don't forget, I not only saw your audition, I attended it. You're a born actor. I've seen it in military leaders. To be a leader is to play the role of a leader. If you are good at it, your soldiers follow you and believe in you. If you are not good at playing that role, they don't trust you and they don't follow you. Like I said, you're a natural." Tyler waved and went off to do what showrunners do. Jack leaned back in his chair, which, like the movie, had his name printed on the back, and plunged into thought. He met all the actors while reading the script and was immediately struck by the professionalism of the cast. This was not the spoiled group of actors you read about in Hollywood gossip. Everyone showed up on time, ready to work and with memorized lines. Mark Tibbs easily switched from his natural British accent to a Southern accent for the role of James Bonham. Jack has lost his Texas accent over the years and has spent enough time in the South that his accent is unmistakable. But what surprised him most was Maria Elena Montoya, a person before whom he bowed. Everyone knew her tragic story, and everyone was attentive to her feelings. She hadn't filmed in 3 years, but watching her on set, you would never have known it. She was the first to arrive on set and the last to leave. She was always willing to lend a helping hand to anyone who needed it. It didn't matter if it was a gaffer or a caterer. Maria Elena was always there to offer help. When Jack first met her at the reading table, she smiled at Jack and told him that she had enjoyed reading his novel. His first thought was, "Yes, of course you read it," but her next words stunned him. "To truly understand Angelique, I wanted to try to get inside her head. I couldn't do that just by reading your novel. I had my agent request a copy of your dissertation and read it. It gave me a better understanding of who Angelique was as a person." Maria Elena Montoya wasn't just a smarmy face who could repeat lines written for her by someone else, a talent that many actors of both sexes believe makes them special. Nor was she a pretty face perched on a pair of long legs that could walk the runway during a fashion show. Nor was she just the niece of the King of Spain and the widow of a Formula One driver. Maria Elena Montoya was a complex, intelligent woman whose stunning looks hid an almost genius IQ. She was comfortable talking about Parisian fashion or quantum computing. She was well-read and articulate on a wide variety of topics. Jack was blown away by the 35-year-old actress and realized he needed to stay as far away from her as possible. He could easily make a fool of himself, and he didn't want to let that happen. The first scene Jack filmed with Maria was a scene from episode 4. Tyler originally thought of casting a younger actor to play the role of a young Robert Bonham. When Jack showed up at Tyler's ranch with a mustache and outgrown hair, Tyler realized that with a little makeup and special effects, it would be easy to age Jack, allowing him to play Robert for decades. Not only would this save money, but it would also provide a more believable continuity over time. And Jack was up to the task. In the scene they filmed today, Robert Bonham was pushing Angelica away. His wife died in childbirth 6 months ago and Robert felt he needed to grieve some more. Angelica had been in love with Robert since she was a teenager and longed for him. Robert stubbornly insisted that they were not together. Angelica threw caution to the wind and rushed to Robert. Scene: the interior of the Bonham law firm's offices daytime. Angelica. Mi querido, you can't grieve forever. I am here. I love you. I long for your touch. Don't push me away. Angelica approaches Robert. Her arms are outstretched. As she slowly approaches Robert, his expression becomes conflicted. He mourns for his wife, but she is dead. Angelica is beautiful, vibrant, and desires him. Robert closes his eyes and a calmness descends on him. His face seems to relax and a smile appears on his lips. He opens his arms and Angelica throws herself into his embrace. They kiss passionately. End scene. The English have a word that is unique to them. It's a word that is difficult to translate into American English. The word thunderstruck is close to it, but it is still missing. The British word is gobsmacked. Kissing Maria Elena made Jack dumbfounded. It wasn't good. Not good at all. He had to find Tyler. It was time to reassess his role. Bullard Chevrolet. Service Department. Danny Bullard was furious. Of the 4 interviews he had scheduled for the new service manager, he had cancelled 3 of them. 2 of them hadn't even bothered to call, they just didn't show up. He had been managing the service department as well as the sales department for almost 6 months now, and the stress was getting to him. He was yelling at both employees and customers. His wife was taking the brunt of his anger. Last night he was so angry that he pushed Kathy through the closet door in the bedroom. For a moment he saw the terror in her eyes that he might come after her and hurt her. Damn! He just needed to find a good service manager. Danny was tense and angry when the speakerphone said he was needed at the service center. Shit! The service client was a hottie. Blonde with a ponytail, black yoga pants, Nike cross trainers, and a pink t-shirt that said AOC for president. Jesus fucking Christ, Danny thought. Fucking Barbie soccer mom. A few feet away stood a Barbie clone playing on his cell phone. He couldn't tell if the clone was his daughter or his sister. They both looked alike. Danny put a smile on his face as he approached the customer. Hi. I'm Danny Bullard. I'm the owner. Do you have a problem you'd like to talk to someone about? Yes. I'm Marcy Clarendon. I dropped off my Suburban a week ago because the air conditioner stopped working. Your service advisor charged me $150 to diagnose the problem and told me the compressor was faulty. She also said I needed to replace. Marcy paused, checking the bill, the battery and the orifice. She quoted an amount of $1,500, including diagnostics. Marcy paused, and that gave Danny a chance to cast a glance at Debbie, who was his only female counselor. She studiously avoided his gaze. Barbie's clone continued to play on his cell phone while Barbie took a breath. I agreed to the repair and 2 days later she called me and told me my Suburban was ready. I paid for the repair and when I went out to the car and started it up, the air conditioning wasn't working. I went back and talked to your consultant, this time the customer actually pointed to Debbie. Your counselor told me that I would have to keep my Suburban, but I could borrow it. I hadn't heard from her all day, so I called in the afternoon and asked what was going on with my car. She told me that the evaporator was leaking and it would cost me another $1,500 to repair it. The customer swung for an estimate. That's unacceptable. I want to know what you're going to do about it. Danny tried to put a sympathetic expression on his face. That's unfortunate. I'm sure you realize that you can't always catch every problem the first time. Sometimes you have to fix the most serious problems first, and then other problems pop up. Marcy wasn't happy with that. I paid $150 to diagnose the reason my air conditioner is not working. If I pay you to diagnose a problem, I expect you to diagnose it. If your people had done their job right, we wouldn't be here. Danny tried to calm her down. A hysterical woman was just what he needed to end this shitty day. Okay, calm down and think about this rationally. The price would be the same if we diagnosed everything at once or the way it ended up happening. You'd still have to pay the same amount. Being told to calm down was exactly what she needed to hear in order to take action. I was willing to pay $1,500 for air conditioning. Neither then nor now was I willing to pay $3,000 for air conditioning in an 8-year-old Suburban. I want my old parts installed and my money back. Danny glanced at Debbie, who muttered the word gone. Danny turned to Marcy and said, "That can't be right. Your parts have been sent for recycling. Look, I'm willing to waive the $150 diagnostic fee if you replace the evaporator. That should help a little. By this point, Danny's head was throbbing with a headache and he just wanted the day to be over. This is unacceptable. I want a refund. I want my truck restored to the condition it was in when I brought it in for service. If you can't do that, then I want to talk to your boss. Danny exhaled noisily. He'd had enough. He was sick of playing service manager, and his head hurt so bad he was afraid he was going to have a stroke. When I said I own this dealership, what do you think it means that I have someone I report to? You think Charlie Chevrolet signs my paycheck? I'm the fucking owner, you stupid cunt. I have the final say, and what I say will be done. Pay for the vaporizer or don't pay for the vaporizer. I don't give a fuck one way or the other. The air conditioning in my car works fine. I don't care if you sweat or not. But if you want to come back after work, we'll try to work something out. Danny turned on his heel and walked out of the service department. He didn't see the Barbie clone smile, tap the screen of his phone, and give Barbie a thumbs up. Straight Flush Ranch. 125 miles west of Austin, Texas. The set of the TV show The Lawyers. Tyler threw a party to celebrate the end of filming. Buckman's Barbecue Restaurant out of Fredericksburg, Provid. Ed the party, and you couldn't walk 10 feet without ending up at a full beer tub. In addition, 2 bar tents had every conceivable alcoholic beverage on display, ready to be distributed as part of Tyler's open bar. 3 bands were scheduled to perform at the party. The party started after the last stage ended at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and will continue until tomorrow morning. Tyler provided a whole fleet of buses to take the cast back to their hotels or Airbnbs. Tyler felt that there was a need to live and Ascendant would pay for it. Jack had never been much of a drinker, but he'd been drinking the same beer for an hour. There were hay bales around the stage, stacked so that you could sit on one bale and lean back on the other. Jack was sitting with his eyes closed and facing the sun, listening to the music, when Maria Elena sat down next to him. He realized it was Maria Elena before he even opened his eyes. There was only a light scent of sandalwood coming from her. "You've been avoiding me for weeks now, my general." She said the word general using the Spanish pronunciation. Jack sighed. After his on-screen kiss with Maria, Jack had practically begged Tyler to cancel his contract with him. Tyler had laughed at him. "Every time you move, this girl's eyes follow you. I know you're attracted to her. I think she cares for you, too. I don't know what she sees in an old broken-down soldier, but damn, you're a lucky son of a bitch. So hell no, I'm not letting you out of your contract. This girl has had a rough time the last few years. She's come out of her shell and it's partly your fault. Take her to the malt shop, or the hop, or wherever else you old farts go. You both deserve to be happy." Jack had not given up hope of staying away from Maria Elena. She was 17 years younger than he was. Her uncle was the King of Spain. She was world famous and considered one of the most beautiful women in the world. What could he offer her? A 3-bedroom house in Round Rock, Texas? He opened his eyes and turned to face Maria. She was wearing cowboy boots, jeans, and a cowboy hat. She was also wearing a brown t-shirt with a U.S. Army emblem over a heart. Good God, Jack thought. She's the most beautiful creature that ever lived. You're right, Maria. I have been avoiding you. When I'm around you, I lose all sense of who I am and what I'm doing. I don't like losing control like that. It scares me. You scare me. Maria smiled at Jack. You're not going to go to war again, sweet general. And after we've been married a few years, maybe you'll stop losing control of yourself. Jack shook his head. I have a 3-bedroom house in Round Rock, Texas. I'm a college history professor who's temporarily fulfilling his fantasy and starring in a TV show. When this is over, I'll go back to teaching. He shook his head. Maria, I'm not what you're looking for. Jack, I'm 35 years old. I am a widow who lost a child while he was still in my womb. Millions of people saw my husband die. It's been televised and repeated over and over again. I've experienced his death 1,000 times. You know what else I've experienced over and over again? Maria looked intently at Jack, who shook his head negatively. I'm reliving a conversation I had with him the night before he died. A conversation in which I told him I would no longer look past his affairs. I told him I would divorce him after the race. Tears streamed down Mariah's face as she poured her heart out to Jack. He was distraught. He should have quit and not raced, but his stupid macho pride wouldn't let him. And it killed him. I killed him. That's why I hid for 3 years. I killed my husband, I killed my child, and I lost 3 years of my life mourning something that was not my fault and over which I had no control. Jack, you're the first person I've wanted to be with since my husband died. With you, Jack. No one else. I love you. I ache for you. Don't reject me. Jack smiled at Maria. That sounds like a line from some cheesy TV show. Maria smiled back. So you are my future husband. Bullard Chevrolet. Dallas, Texas. Owner's office. Hello, Mr. Bullard. This is Cammie Carson. I'm the producer of Deadline, America. Are you familiar with our show? Danny's first thought was that someone was messing with him. Of course, he was familiar with Deadline, America. It was the most watched news show on television. I know your show. How can I help you, Ms. Carson? We're going to do a whole series of articles about departed athletes who have successfully transitioned into the business world. We hear too many stories about athletes going broke within a few years of leaving professional sports, and we thought a series like this would be a good counterpoint to that. Is this something you might be interested in? We'll interview you and your wife in your home and at your dealership. Yes, he was interested. And Katie would be over the moon. Bullard's house. Dallas, Texas. Danny and Kathy were sitting on the couch in front of the 90-inch TV, eagerly awaiting the start of Deadline, America. The producers told them that the entire episode would be about Danny and Kathy. The episode was heavily advertised on television and social media, and they were almost dreading the start of the show. The producers refused to show them the final edit, so this will be the first time they will see it with the rest of America line. The first part of the episode covers Danny's soccer career from high school, college, through the NFL and his time as a defensive back for the Chicago Bears. The episode talks about how Danny Bullard became Danny "Da Bull" Danny in Chicago. Danny Bullard is known for his fierce, aggressive play on the field and wild, unpredictable life off the field. Some of his most famous games are recounted, his Pro Bowl appearances and his one Super Bowl appearance with the Bears in which they lost to the Colts. The storyline then switched to his move to the Dallas Cowboys and the problems he faced after the trade. The show talked about how Dallas cheated to take a player past his prime and Danny didn't like that. There were several interviews with players and coaches, but for some reason none of them had anything good to say about Danny. Most of them were unfriendly, and a couple of them were even rude. The show quickly moved on to Danny's purchase of a Chevrolet dealership and his life in Dallas after soccer. Katie was shocked when the interview moved on to some of Danny's past romantic partners, and the fact that none of them agreed to appear in front of the camera or comment was telling. The next segment focused on Katie Bullard. When asked about her past, she tap-danced away and gave vague answers. Instead, she wanted to focus on her charity work and her upcoming job as co-chair of the Beef and Butter Gala. The next segment was an interview with Katie's daughter Kelsey. Katie was shocked to the core when she saw that Kelsey was being interviewed. How did the producers know she had a daughter? How did they find her? Kelsey, dressed in her West Point cadet uniform, explained to the interviewer who her father was and how her mother cheated and then left her father for a used car salesman. The camera switched to a photo montage of Jack. There were pictures of Jack as he rose through the ranks in the U.S. Army. There were photos of Jack being awarded medals and the host briefly listing the awards. In the last Army photo, Kathy pins Jack's general star on his collar. The next photo was of Jack's affair. This was followed by a photo montage from the set of The Advocates and a clip from the TV show showing Jack's role. Kathy thought Jack had a small role on the show. In fact, he was the star along with that Mexican girl. The last photo was an official army photo of Jack in the rank of officer with a voiceover saying, "Brigadier General, retired." Jack McCloud refused to answer questions about his ex-wife, saying only, "I have nothing to say about this woman." The next interviewee was Carolyn Collier, chair of the Beef and Butter Gala. When asked about Kathy's role as co-chair of the BOG, Carolyn laughed. The Bullets made a very generous donation to the gala this year, but the association didn't end there. "As far as I know, they're not even on the guest list." Kathy sat back in shock. Danny was seething with rage, not only over the $300,000 thrown away, which he now desperately needed, but also because he guessed what was coming next. The interviewer walked Danny around the service department with Danny, and Danny was telling him about the state-of-the-art equipment and how they try to provide top-notch customer service. The interviewer then asked Danny if he would comment on the video the producers had received. Assuming he had nothing to hide, Danny replied, "Absolutely." And then he was crucified while Katie looked on. That fucking clone of that fucking soccer Barbie recorded the whole fucking conversation. At least one question was answered for him. The clone was the bitch's daughter. Which made this situation even worse. Bullard Chevrolet, Dallas, Texas. Owner's office. "Hello, Michael. To what do I owe this honor?" Danny had to smile and make a kind face, even though he felt like killing someone. "Anybody." "Hey, Danny. Look, I'll get right to the point. After watching Deadline, America last night, we're announcing your loan cancellation." He was glad Danny couldn't see the smile on his face. Michael didn't know Jack McCloud personally, but he was an Army Ranger, just like Michael. Rangers lead the way. "What? You can't do that. That's $3 million. I don't have that kind of money, and besides, you have no right to name it. My account at Phoenix is in perfect order. Under our latest equity agreement, we have the right to revoke your loan under certain conditions. One of them is if your reputation becomes detrimental to our brand, which it has. But most importantly, if you lose the right to sell a dealer franchise on the manufacturer's brand." "What the hell are you talking about?" shouted Danny. "We're still Bullard Chevrolet and we're going to stay Bullard Chevrolet." "Did you talk to Ken Hodges today?" asked Michael. Ken Hodges was the vice president of franchise operations for the Chevrolet dealership. Although he didn't really report to Ken Hodges, the latter could make or break a dealership. "No, I didn't talk to that damn Ken Hodges today." Danny paced around his office. His head was splitting and he felt nauseous in his stomach. He was facing his office door when he heard a knock on that door. He was about to angrily tell whoever it was to get the hell out, but stopped when he saw a figure standing in the doorway. He carefully put the phone receiver in its holder and said, "Hello, Ken. What can I do for you?" "Bullard's house. Dallas, Texas." All Danny wanted was a double scotch and some peace and quiet. All he got was a mouthy bitch with a shitty temper. "Did you read the list of Emmy nominees that came out today?" was the first thing out of Katie's mouth. Danny took a big sip of whiskey before answering. "When the fuck do you think I have time to pay attention to bullshit like this? I work 80 hours a week trying to keep this fucking place running as an independent dealer. What the fuck do I care about some fucking television show?" Danny finished the rest of his scotch and headed to the bar for more. Jack was nominated for an Emmy for Best Actor in a miniseries. Can you believe that? Too bad I missed the chance to be on set during the filming of his book and meet all those famous actors. Because of you, I missed the chance to go to the awards ceremony, she said with anger in her voice. Tears came to Katie's eyes. She didn't even have a beef and butter gala to look forward to. A $300,000 donation and she wasn't even invited to the gala, she thought bitterly. But an Emmy? That was almost as important as the Oscars. And she blew it. Her ex-husband was suddenly famous and all over the news for his portrayal of Robert Bonham. His novel was re-released and became a bestseller. Last week, she read an article online about Jack getting the role of Hollywood hottie Gary Cleveland's brother in a major motion picture. She should be with Jack. She pictured the two of them going to dinner in Cannes with Gary and his glamorous lawyer wife. This could be her life. God, how screwed up she was. The Emmy Awards. Microsoft Theater. Los Angeles, California. The series The Lawyers received a total of 10 Emmy Award nominations. Mark Tibbs received a nomination for Best Supporting Actor in a Miniseries, Maria Elena Montoya received a nomination for Best Actress in a Miniseries, and retired Brigadier General Jack McLeod received a nomination for Best Actor in a Miniseries. No one was surprised when both Mark and Maria Elena won. Likewise, no one was surprised when Jack didn't win. When the winner's name was called, Jack smiled wryly and applauded along with the rest of the audience. He didn't even bother to write a congratulatory speech. Of all the things that had happened to Jack during that whirlwind year, the best was the growing intimacy between him and Maria Elena. Sitting next to him in the Microsoft movie theater, she looked at him with adoration and he smiled back at her. There was no need to say anything. They kept their budding romance a secret. The only person who knew about his feelings for Maria Elena was Kelsey, though out of the corner of his eye he saw Tyler smirking at him. Kelsey was ecstatic about their relationship. She wanted Jack to put a ring on it right now. Kelsey was coming home for a few weeks over the summer and wanted to get to know Maria better. It had been almost 2 years since her parents divorced, and Kelsey had only spoken to her mother a handful of times. She'd never once visited her. She needed another woman in the family. Jack McLeod's house. Round Rock, Texas. Jack was surprised to hear the doorbell ring. He had spent so little time in his house that he couldn't understand how anyone knew he was home. The girls had gone shopping and hadn't returned yet. He was going through his paperwork and packing to move when the doorbell rang. When he opened the door and saw the caller, he was shocked and even a little alarmed. "Katie," he said without a shadow of warmth. "Hey, Jack. Can I talk to you for a minute?" Katie didn't look well. She had a haggard look in her eyes and a pale complexion. Jack breathed a sigh of relief. "Sure, come on in. You know the way." Katie sat down in the chair that had once belonged to her. Tears came to her eyes at the memory of it. Jack sat in his usual chair. It seemed different to him. He hadn't been home in months, and the cushions had returned to their usual state. They no longer matched his butt. The strangest thoughts come to mind at the strangest times, he pondered. "You're selling the house. Why are you selling it?" "I love this house." Katie's eyes were wet with tears. "I don't really spend a lot of time here. I bought some land west of Austin and I'm building a house there. I bought some horses, and that's where I plan to spend my time when I'm not on set. I've watched you on TV. I even saw the movie you were in with Gary Cleveland. You were so good, Jack. Why didn't you ever try to become an actor when we were married?" Jack shook his head at the ridiculousness of the question. "In case you've forgotten, I was too busy serving as an officer in the United States Army. Acting wasn't part of my plans back then. Hell, it wouldn't be now either, if only my agent hadn't contracted me for 3 movies over the next 2 years. Katie's eyes widened at this revelation. It only strengthened her decision. "I wanted to tell you how sorry I am for everything I did. I had everything I wanted and I threw it all away." She began to sob, looking at her clenched hands. "I'm so sorry. I want you to know that I divorced Danny. You'll never have to worry about him again." Katie let Jack's exclamation pass her ears. "Okay, Katie. I forgive you. It's water under the bridge. It's nothing bad, nothing wrong. It's water off a duck's back. Don't worry about it. We're fine." Jack stood up. "Was there anything else? Do you think there's a chance?" She was interrupted by voices coming from the kitchen. The girls are back early, Jack thought. When they rounded the corner, Katie was shocked to see her daughter being escorted by an obviously pregnant Hispanic woman who appeared to be several years older than Kelsey. The woman was gorgeous and Katie wondered who she was. Their laughter and chatter stopped abruptly when they noticed the guest. "Mom," Kelsey admitted without the slightest emotion. "What brings you back from Hades?" Kels, her father cautioned her. Be polite to your mother. Have a seat, ladies. Kathy was just asking me a question. He nodded toward Kathy. You were saying. Katie took a deep breath. If she was going to grovel and humiliate herself, she might as well do it in front of her daughter, but doing it in front of some pregnant Mexican woman? She didn't care about that. Kelsey, it's been years since we've seen each other, so I don't know all your friends. Would you like to introduce me? I'm sorry, Mom. You've always been up on Hollywood gossip, so I figured you'd recognize her. Katie, is it Bullard or Bascom? Anyway, Katie, this is Maria Elena Montoya. She's my friend, but more importantly, she's my father's fiancée and the mother of my future little sister. Maria Elena Montoya, meet the stupidest woman in America. Establishing the truth. This is a work of fiction. The only real person in this story is James Bonham. He did not have a brother named Robert. However, he did have a brother named Millage Luke Bonham who stayed in South Carolina. Luke was governor of South Carolina until he resigned to be promoted to brigadier general in the CSA. To my knowledge, he did not marry the King of Spain's niece. Tyler Sherman is a fictional character. He's not based on any real person. What, you don't believe me? Have I ever lied to you?